Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 29th of May 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio behind the technical desk is Nick Green. And we're going to be joined by David Scott, north of the border, giving us northern exposure. Well, first of all, the weather. Brighton is gloomy, as just popped up on screen. We've got quite a lot of rain, had some torrential rain here in Plymouth, pretty grey at the moment, but Manchester is starting to get a bit of sunshine, and I understand from David Scott that north of the border, certainly, where are we, on the east coast side is mainly sunny at the moment, so it looks as though the best of the bunch is in Scotland. Well, before we bring in David, let's just have a look at the major news, which is sweeping UK at the moment, and we'll take you to the Express newspaper. Here it is. Well, extraordinary. I love being squashed. Meet the petite model who made £120,000 being sat on by 35 stone women. This is the state of the news today. We've picked on the Express because it is so utterly pathetic. But in fact, in our scan across all of the mainstream papers, most of it is just utter dross. And what is the purpose of this? Well, of course, it's designed to keep people's minds away from the important stuff. We just pop that one back, if you will, Nick. Thank you. Let's remember that the Express, that's busy talking about petite models being squashed by 35 stone men, is the same, 35 stone women, is the same newspaper that says it has secret intelligence, that ISIS has a gay wing, and that homosexuality is rife amongst terrorists. Of course, that article we picked on very strongly because the Express claimed it was dealing with experts, but it was unable to actually provide any evidence as to who these experts were or their qualifications. What's true, the model story or the ISIS gay wing? It doesn't matter because all of this is designed to keep our minds off what's really happening behind the scenes. And if we get into the meat of it pretty quickly, we'll go north of the border. BBC here reporting that Susan O'Brien QC is going to lead the public inquiry into historical child abuse. Here's the famous BBC headline, of course, the abuse is not going on now. It's all something that happened many years ago. It's just historical. And there's another message here. It's the same north or south of the border. Basically, no member of the public is fit, intelligent enough to be in charge, and we should all trust yet another judge. And if I remember correctly, the judges in Scotland, of course, do not have to declare their interests, so we have no idea of this lady's connections. And with that, we'll hand over to David Scott. Don't know whether you'd like to respond quickly on that one.
Well, I know very little about the leading QC, Miss O'Brien, but I would like to suggest that we probably will in a week or two. There'll be a lot of people making inquiries. We'll find out, I'm sure, a lot about her background. And I think the first thing is to see if she manages to stay in post, and then how she can subsequently conducts matters. Initial comments here on the BBC website. They're talking about abusers facing the full force of the law, which is very good. And we're talking about abuse in institutions, foster care, long-term hospital care and boarding schools. I'm a little less relaxed about a short list like that. Surely we should be looking at all abuse throughout our society, or certainly throughout any governmental aspect of it. So hopefully that's not an exhaustive list.
No. And I think you mentioned earlier that a particular gentleman who had been heading up or was involved in inquiry regarding child abuse has had a few problems himself. Can you remind me what that one was?
Yes, this comes on the same day that the former head of the Children's Panel in Scotland. Now, the Children's Panel is a unique Scottish innovation in the protection of children and of also in dealing with criminality amongst children. So it looks at the full range of issues relating to children in the state, and is held up as being a model as to how the rest of the world should actually be doing childcare on an institutional basis. And this former head, Mr. Daniel Ross, now 62, has just been sentenced to 12 years for child abuse.
Mm-hmm. So we got another example of these people embedded in the very systems that are supposed to be there to protect children. This is what it's really all about. A few cynics, I will say with a smile on my face in our chat box, saying with regard to Scotland, another cover-up on its way. Well, we will see. They may well be right, but we will keep an eye on what's going to happen there. Now, we introduced this yesterday. We were provided some information about the policies that the major parties have planned for 2015. We talked about the Conservative Party yesterday. They think they've got a lot more to do to champion lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender rights. They're going to issue pardons to men convicted of sodomy and gross indecency. They're going to extend laws on hate crime. They're going to outlaw groups that foment hate. They've got plans for extremism disruptive orders. Sorry about that. Sex education. They're going to support the homosexualization of sex education. And of course, they're going to use Stonewall advisor alongside the Education Secretary. Abortion. Well, they're going to go for lowering the 24-week abortion limit. And British values are effectively now pink laws to support LGBT. And that is all going to be enforced. So that's what the Conservatives have got planned for us. Lib Dems, they're going to pardon historic convictions between adults, and they're going to champion LGBT rights, and they're going to tackle homophobia. They're going to enact the remaining clauses, the Equality Act. They're going to challenge gender stereotyping, and they're going to tackle homophobic and transphobic bullying and discrimination. Sounds good to me. Right, Labour, well, they're going a step further. They're appointing an international LGBT rights envoy to decriminalise homosexuality worldwide. So the Labour Party is now going for the world. Expand and strengthen homo and transphobic hate crime law. Eradicate criticism of Islam, pro-religious hatred law. We'll have to look into that one very carefully. Compulsory sex education from age 5. Train all teachers to tackle homophobic bullying. And British values, they're going to want to register all homeschool parents. Well, I know that the next line is actually SNP, but I'm going to keep the suspense until Friday next week. What do you think about those initial policies? Now, these are policy areas. These have actually been leaked to us by some individuals within the mainstream parties. What are your thoughts, David?
Well, a couple of things stand out there right away. First is the proposed assault by the Labour Party on the homeschooling community. Everybody needs to be registered. Oh, yes. I'm not very relaxed about that. There is still the ability in the UK, if you never put your child into school and you want to home educate, you are still free to do that. So that's an assault on one of our remaining rights there. And I'm sure the homeschooling people who are very well informed about political trouble coming down the path will have a thing or two to say about that. The other one was when we're talking about religious freedom. Now, I'm all for religious freedom, but I would point out that it conflicts with the view that you're not able to discriminate against people based on their lifestyle choices, because you can't be any sort of ethical human being without applying discrimination based on people's conduct. in many aspects of your life. We saw recently in Northern Ireland when a baker who had strong Christian convictions declined to provide a service to people who wanted a cake decorated in support of gay marriage. Was quite happy to organise someone else to do, to provide that service. Didn't want to do it themselves because of their religious convictions. They ended up getting fined and convicted, and that's still going. I think that's going to appeal now. So we have a conflict between the state wanting to stop any form of discrimination and the state wanting to provide some form of religious freedom. The two aren't really compatible. What we need is the freedom to provide services and associate with people or not, as we choose as individuals, and that would be called freedom.
Well, that's a very interesting point. Because this is such a subject of interest, I'm going to say that we've already started to get some comments in our chat box. And one lady is saying in the chat box that she's gay. She now feels that she's being set up by government, to which I say this is absolutely what we're talking about. This is a very, very callous, cynical system of government which seeks to use any group, disabled people, for example, also being used to initially divide the way we relate to each other. And if we look at those potential policy areas, we can see that the government intends to get more involved in our lives to tell us what we can and can't do. This is subtle but very, very callous policy. We will talk about that issue in more detail in due course. We'll just take a little break for a few seconds here. We're going to advertise this, servant to the country betrayed by the state. This is our little stinger for an interview which will be released very early next week. Member of the Armed Forces talking about his incredible experiences, and wait and see what the detail of that one is. But we'll just play the short video clip out now.
Myself, I have rights. I believe in my rights, defended my country on an ideology of truth and justice, and I believe in it strongly. And now knowing that it's totally false and corrupt, I won't stand for that. I won't stand to be bullied either.
Okay, well, there we are. Watch out for that interview, because it is an incredible story about what is really happening in the country and what one man thinks about what's happening in the country. Well, the other thing we're going to do is, many people have said it's tricky to find where UK column previous news and videos, where all of that is archived. Now, of course, remember, we had to be careful because of APVOD, which said we were becoming too TV-like, and therefore we couldn't put up a schedule. Well, I'm pleased to say, if you go to YouTube, Square Peg Round Hole, you will find that a very kind individual has started to put all of our productions in a neat chronological order, and that'll be added to daily and things packaged obviously by the month. So if you haven't been able to find what you're after, there's not a full archive there yet, but there will be a steady stream of programs in the archive on YouTube from here on. So Square Peg Round Hole, and you should be able to find it. Well, we're going to come back to David Scott, because he has been doing some really first-class research into what's been happening north of the border. And so we're going to focus for the rest of the programme on Scotland and how there is some really amazing manoeuvring behind the scenes to get policy in. This doesn't seem to be coming in through debate in the Scottish Parliament. Now, we've got a variety of slides to bring up on screen, but just a quick comment, please, David. How do people see the Scottish Parliament at the moment? Is there lots of debate about issues? Where's the policy coming from?
The Parliament is it's found its feet to some extent. We do have a certain amount of active debate, and some of the debate quality is now reasonably good, and that wasn't really the case early in its life. But there is, of course, a lot that's unsaid or not said or concealed. We had Kenny McCaskill was revealed within the last 24 hours as having essentially lied about his policy on giving prisoners the vote. And he was, whilst in government, against this. And now he is on the back benches. He's all for giving prisoners the vote. And how he explained this is he was doing the wrong thing, but for entirely the right reasons, because it was politically expedient in the run-up to the independence referendum not to muddy the waters with untidy things like whether or not to give prisoners the ability to vote for the Scottish referendum. So it was parting long grass. He made speeches saying, making the point that this wasn't on the agenda, and then it immediately became clear that that was just for political expediency. So there's a lot of that goes on, same as every other parliament. And the standing, I suppose one thing that would have to be made quite clearly is the Scottish Parliament was designed so that no one would ever have a majority. And all of the checks and balances rely on no one party having a majority. Now that the SNP do have a majority, all the committees, which are the main checks and balances in the Scottish Parliament, there's only one house, there's no revising chamber. All of the committees have an inbuilt SNP majority, and therefore the degree of checks and balances for anything going through the Parliament is almost zero. So it's very much what the SNP wants, the SNP get at the moment.
Right. Okay. Well, let's begin with your first find, which is this gentleman here. So it's a Guardian article. It's talking about lessons from Scotland on streamlining government. We've mentioned this theme before, but it appears that all of a sudden the Scottish model of government has become particularly important. And Scotland's former senior civil servant, Sir John Elvidge, says that the rest of UK could learn from reforms introduced since 2007. Now, what do we know about this man? Well, thanks to you, David, we now know that, of course, he's an absolute common purpose man. Here's the Common Purpose website boasting about him. And, of course, he's one of these individuals that he can do anything and everything. So he's working with Edinburgh Airports, former permanent secretaries with the Carnegie Foundation. If you have a look at his CV, he can do anything, multitask, as many companies as you like. So common purpose, and of course the common purpose key underlying agenda to transform our system of government. But here he is also linked into the Carnegie Trust. We're now getting into the sorts of think tanks that we've warned about for some time. And what is all this about? Well, we're going to have a look into that in a bit more detail. But more information on him. He's previously worked in the Cabinet Office, the Scottish Office, works in an advisory role with several governments in Europe, China, North America. He's an adjunct professor at the Shanghai Chiao Tung University. He works with the University of Oxford. He's a fellow of the Royal Society. He's an associate of the Institute of Government. It goes on and on and on. And of course, he's thoroughly involved with Carnegie. So why are we interested with the Carnegie link? Well, this is the bit that you discovered, the enabling state, a relationship between government and the people. let's expand the small text a bit. And the interesting down here is we're talking about a comprehensive policy review, the rise of the enabling state of the UK and Ireland that encapsulates the emerging enabling state. So they've got something very interesting planned for us here. Tell us a bit about what drew your attention to this man and his work.
Yes, we got a tip-off from the always well-informed homeschooling network called Schoolhouse in Scotland. They are very good at seeing what politically is happening, as they tend to be on the receiving end of it quite quickly. So I was told, have a look at Sir John Elvidge. He's the mother lode. So I thought, well, I'll find out what that means. And I found he was discussing something called the Scottish model of government, of which he has been described as the mastermind. So this is very much a personal move and statement. And I was amazed to find that it was already in place. This isn't an idea. This is a fact on the ground, and has been a fact on the ground since 2007. And here we are in 2015, and I'm only now hearing about it, and I'm reasonably interested in what's going on in my country and reasonably savvy, and I hadn't picked up anything about this. It was all done under the radar. Now, the Scottish model of government is a very interesting concept, and Sir John Elvidge is a very interesting gentleman. He's very well spoken. He comes across as very reasonable and paced, but you always get a feeling there's a great amount that he's not saying. He puts forward little bits of the agenda that he wants the audience to hear, but there's clearly more going on under the surface. And in initially proposing the Scottish model of government, what he was pointing out was the abject failure of essentially the welfare state. And I've got one quote here. He talked about a consistency of failure. 60 years of evidence that it can't do the job. The evidence is overwhelming. So he was talking about how, in many regards, everyone's doing quite well in the country, and things like life expectancy and average incomes are going up, for which the government was taking all of the credit. But he was pointing out that the 20 or 30% of people at the bottom of society, i.e. those in whose name the welfare state actually operates, are getting, their conditions are becoming poorer and poorer. They're becoming ever more isolated, and the welfare state is doing nothing for them, or it's actually harming them. So his answer to this was to create a giant joined-up government. Government as a single entity, no more departments, no more separation, one super government. Joined-up government taken to its logical conclusion.
Well, David, as always, we're going to provide some documentary evidence to back up what you say. People always listen and then they say yes, but where's the evidence? So let's just gently move through some of this material, and I'll of course bring you back in. But Carnegie, we've got this man associated with Carnegie. Who is Carnegie? Well, it's, according to them, they're an independent endowed charitable trust. They're incorporated by a royal charter, so that to me seems to say they've got some pretty powerful connections. One of over 20 foundations. They're staffed by 15 people in Dunfermline, Scotland. They got lovely offices. And then what are they about? Well, apparently Andrew Carnegie said in 1913 that he was seeking the improvement of the well-being of the masses of the people of Great Britain and Ireland by such means as are embraced within the meaning of the word charitable, and which the trustees may from time to time select as best fitted from age to age for securing these purposes, remembering that the new needs are constantly arising as the masses advance. Let's bring in a big red arrow there, because this man regards us as the masses. We're not on his level. We are the masses. And he's going to work charitably to, well, what is he going to do? Let's have a look. I need that one back again, Nick. Sorry, if you will. basically, Carnegie claim to be charitable, but if you read all their material, they have got a socio-economic political agenda going. But I think it's their strap line which gives the clue, because if you go back up to that logo, you might not be able to read it, but underneath it says changing minds, changing lives. So this doesn't sound to be charitable to me. This sounds to be political engineering on a pretty grand scale. And we can come back into Sir John Eldridge here. Let's remind ourselves, not only Carnegie, but common purpose. And this was the quote that you picked up on. I'll read it out very quickly. In partnership between civil service and political leadership, a radical Scottish model of government has developed since 2007, building on the learning from the earlier period of devolution. It's based on the effort to have government function as a single organisation working towards a single defined government purpose based on outcomes, establishing a partnership based on that purpose with the rest of the public sector, which is capable of being joined by other parts of civil society. It rests on an ambitious conception of what is achievable through such a partnership between the public sector and civil society. It places strategic leadership and the facilitation of cooperation between organisations and sections of society at the heart of the role of central government, rather than a managerialist view of the relationship of central government to others. Brilliant quote. What does that mean, David?
Well, this is a question. What does it mean? When proposing these ideas, Mr. Eldridge will stand really with the common man. He'll express how government is failing and how we need to either help or get out of the way. And he talks about inverting the pyramid. Pyramids come up a lot in this. He talks about inverting the pyramid of the structure of government. And there's a lot of lip service paid to allowing the individual to do more. But it's very quickly clear that this is more in areas directed by the government. So we're not talking about freedom. We're talking about having government direction of our actions. And that's all for the common good, you understand.
Of course, and we should trust this man. If we have a look at this document, which you found, I mean, this really starts to bring it home. Here we are, Changing the World, an approach to public services improvement in Scotland, the strategic context. When I look at this sort of material, I'm dimly reminded of the Soviet Union and documents that I used to see during my military days. Let's have a look at what they're talking about. So Scotland is on the move. The 4 pillars set the context for this paper. Advantages for Scotland, global recovery. It goes on. And in pink there on the right-hand side of that page is the quote that we've just read out by John Eldridge. So it's embedded in this document. Our way of working down at the bottom. And then we get on to Changing the World, paragraph 16, an approach to transformational change. So this is pretty strong stuff. It's socio-economic policy in this document, the collaborative infrastructure in Scotland, our means of driving improvement. The moment I see the word collaboration, I think of fifth column, I think of subversion, I think of political charity, common purpose. This is really being rammed in our face. And it finally ends here with conclusion that basically the framework does not presume a top-down or governmental view. It seeks to embrace a range of ambitions. So this is pure political doctrine. What I found interesting was on the front page, of course, nobody admits to writing it. And I'll come on to that in a minute, a little thing I picked up. But where did this thing originate from? Well, it came out of the Scottish Leaders Forum. And if you're not sure what that is, well, you should be, because this is another closed-door organisation. What do they say? They're The Scottish Leaders Forum collaborates, shares and improves on co-produced outcomes across all public services for the people of Scotland. Who are they? We're a broad membership of executive leaders of Scottish public services, including public bodies and agencies, third sector organisations, local authorities, further and higher education, and the Scottish Government. Key is they're unelected. And what's their approach? Well, I love this. They are collaborative. They share ideas. They're innovative. They promote new ideas. They're creative. They create a space for artistic and intellectual inventiveness. And they're illuminative. I thought that was a very interesting word, illuminative. And they encourage thought and reflection. So totally unelected. This is one of the big men in their planning group, Sir Peter Housden. I think you will know this gentleman well, David. I just snuck him in here. Here he is. Let's bring him up. There we are. Very nice man. Well, who's he? Permanent Secretary of the Scottish Government, previously Permanent Secretary, Department for Communities and Local Government. So he's absolutely a backdoor government man. Civil servant making policy behind closed doors. Should we trust him? Well, not according to the Telegraph, because the Telegraph warned that he intimidated bosses over the referendum. I'll pass back to you, David. That's a pretty incredible document there.
Yes, there's many things about that take the breath away. Even the title, I mean, Changing the World. It's ostensibly a document about the management of the Scottish public sector. So Changing the World is a bit of an odd title. It kind of goes back to, Fog in the Channel, Continent Cut Off view of the world. But it actually means something more than that, because they are talking about changing the world. They're talking about this being, we're starting in Scotland, and we'll get it running here because Scotland's excellent as a testing ground, because it's quite a relaxed, malleable, slow-to-anger population. And we'll set it up here, and then we will broaden it out. And it's coming to England, it's coming to Ireland, and Sir John Elvidge is going to China and other places all around the world talking about this. I see that Joe Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, and that's not a compliment, is very impressed by this. So clearly these ideas have made it across the Atlantic. They've made it to China. So these are becoming common currency of ideas that have been discussed worldwide. And it started in Scotland. And it started in Scotland without any public debate, political debate, parliamentary debate. It was all done behind closed doors.
All done behind closed doors. This, of course, is always an unscripted news. Thank you very much. Let's bring this in, because here we are, the Chatham House Rules of Confidentiality. The political charity Common Purpose only works under these rules. When a meeting is held under the Chatham House rules, participants are free to use the information received, but neither the identity nor the affiliation of the speakers, nor that of any other participant may be revealed, nor may be it mentioned that the information was received at the meeting. Now, there's only one reason that you'd have a rule like that, and that is to utterly deceive the general public from what is going on. And that, of course, is the aim of working in the Chatham House model. Common Purpose boasts of using that model to deceive people. Well, why would they want to deceive people in Scotland? Let's get back to these frameworks. So here's the next framework document, the 3-step improvement framework for Scotland's public services. And this is the bit that intrigued me, David. All of a sudden, the Scottish Government has decided to put its little logo on this one. So it's almost oh dear, the truth was out the bag, because originally it's an unelected group of people making the policy. Now we better get the Scottish Government logo on it to make it seem as though this has got anything to do with democracy. But let's have a look at some of your pyramids. Here we are, 3-step improvement framework. And what does it say at the top? Well, the top of the pyramid is change the world. We can't feed people. We haven't got enough jobs in England or Scotland. We've got major problems with public infrastructure, but these people are meeting to change the world. Over to you.
Yes. On one level, this shows that if you want, if you do want a job in the Scottish Government, if you can draw a triangle, you can draw a salary. It also shows that all the talk from St John Elvidge and others about this not being top down is simply window dressing. When you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's all showing pyramidal approaches, with the top of the pyramid making the big decisions and the bottom of the pyramid, I guess that would be us, basically doing as it's told. It's all top down. There is nothing new in this. What it is a ramping up of the state. It's making the state more totalitarian, and it's making the state far, far less transparent, because we didn't see any of this coming. It wasn't discussed at all. We're told by Sir John in one of his lectures on YouTube that this all was decided in 2 weeks in the run-up to a budget. So there was a deadline, and all this was decided in Scotland in 2 weeks. And they then went, in that very short period, to the local authorities and got the local authorities to buy in too. So it's not just central government, it's every aspect of every branch of government in Scotland is operating to this really quite secretive agenda.
A secretive agenda with a pyramid control structure. We can have a look at a bit more from their own documents. Let's go to the Scottish Government website. Couldn't help notice this little warning that came up because they've changed from scotland.gov.uk to .gov.scot. So UK clearly chopped off the website there. But this is the bit we're interested in. The Scottish model of procurement puts procurement at the heart of Scotland's economic recovery. Well, it sounds as though they're talking about jobs and economy. I don't think so. I think you're spot on. If we look at the pyramid here, Scottish procurement, what do they say they're going to do at the top of the pyramid? Improving supplier access to public contracts. So what they're really doing is they're opening the lid to allow the private sector to simply cherry pick what it wants of public sector contracts, and that of course is passing control over to these unaccountable global corporations. So it makes sense under a pyramid of power that you're going to have the globalists and their corporations just coming straight in to hoover up what they like in Scotland. And I'll move on to this one that you brought up, which is Scottish Policy Now. Here's the enabling state, a new relationship between public services and the public they serve. It's all for our benefit. We're the masses. We need these people to think for us. And probably our audience won't be able to see it today because it's a little bit small, but the article's by Jennifer Wallace, Policy Manager, Carnegie UK Trust. So we're really back where we started there. Over to you.
Yes. So this thing, the enabling state, is a bit of a woolly concept. It's a bit difficult to pin down. So we'll try and explain a wee bit more about what exactly it is. The core hypothesis from Sir John Elvidge, that maximum control over our own lives is important. Well, yes, it is. That this must coexist with the role of the state. Well, I'm much less sure about that. Says who? Basically, I thought we were sovereign and we gave power to the state if we chose to. But so he's telling us that we must coexist with the role of the state. So that, to me, suggests a fundamental change in the relationship between the state and the people, and something that might well be contrary to the British Constitution. And they need to redefine the relationship between the individual and the state. So that's the core hypothesis. It doesn't really say how it's being redefined, and it doesn't really make very many things clear. But what it does make clear is that the state is not going to go away, and that the state will redefine how it interacts with you and I, and then tell us about it, I think.
Yeah.
Now, he then talked about the problem. He said the problem, and remember, the problem is the abject failure of the state to do any of the things it's claimed the right to do. We might get a chance to talk about that a little bit later on. But if you look at the underclass and some of the urban multiple social deprivation areas in Britain, there's clearly 60 years on after the creation of the welfare state, an enormous failure, and a failure that can be seen everywhere. So he recognised that failure, but promoted a single outcomes-based strategic framework, government-run, to do something about this, to redefine the purpose of government, and abolish the government department as an organisational concept. So there are no more departments. In Scotland, there are no departments. It's one giant government. So if you talk to health, you are also talking to law enforcement, to education, to social services. Information is shared very, very readily and very widely. Whenever there's a gut feel that information should be shared, it's shared. So what we're seeing here is the named person scheme, which we thought was one of the worst and most totalitarian pieces of legislation ever to be written in English, is in fact only one part of a much wider agenda that goes to every corner of government, local and national in Scotland, and deals with everybody in the same mindset.
David, this is a really dangerous change in government that you're describing north of the border. Now, I can imagine a few people watching and listening who are south of the border are thinking, well, okay, but that's Scotland. So let's come back to the lady from Carnegie and see what the Carnegie Trust actually has to say on this subject. So we should be able to bring them in here. Yep. Well, down at the bottom, if we just highlight it, it's saying, with the help of Carnegie, fellow Sir John Elvidge, the Trust has charted this shift in thinking in the UK and Ireland. So they're not just talking about Scotland. This is planned for south of the border and Ireland as well. And thank you very much for pointing this one out to us. Let's bring this up. So here we are now on the Carnegie website, the enabling state in Scotland. Well, we've just had a look at that in detail. But of course, it isn't just Scotland, because here's the enabling state in London, and here is the enabling state in the north of England. So these people are clearly, I beg your pardon, that hasn't come up. There we are, the enabling state in the north of England. So these people are clearly at work throughout the whole of the UK. And of course, they're busy visiting China. So presumably the Chinese are going to get this model as well. It's in your face that we've got an ideology being brought in, which is nothing to do with democracy. Let's move on to this one, Scotland's approach to well-being. You found this from a David Signorini. I had a little look at him. He's part of the Scottish Government, but what's he talking about? A national framework to which all public services in Scotland are aligned, encouraging more effective partnership working, a clear unified 10-year vision. And the moment I see the sort of 5-year, 10-year plan coming out, my memory goes back to documents I saw from the Soviet system, the 5-year plans. We have to have these plans running. You've now got them coming in north of Scotland. And this document, again, although it's got Scottish Government on it, I believe it did originate in Carnegie. Can you tell us any more about this one?
Yes, I think this is also the one that covers the improvement methodology towards the end of it. What they've done, and they've borrowed ideas from business. I would have to say, as someone who's engaged in the business world, I hear Sir John Elvidge talking about the business case of what they're doing, and my reaction is, he shouldn't use big words he doesn't understand, because the whole principle of business is it's a way of finding out the most valuable ways to serve one another. I have a business because I serve my clients. If I ceased to serve my clients, I would no longer have a business in very short order. The government talks about service, talks a lot about service. It's all about service. They're providing services, but there's no choice, right? And that's the critical thing. The money is extracted from us by coercion, and we're forced to undertake these services whether we want them or not. That's not a business case. That's a government approach, and it's quite the opposite. It's the opposite of freedom and the opposite of thriving in many ways.
Yeah. If I may interject there, this really is the communitarian state. This is a blend of communism and fascism, and we're bringing in the corporate sector. I think we've got to focus a little bit on this word communitarian, because it does fit this political agenda very well.
It does. It certainly does. One of the things that we've noticed with the affectation of business principles being brought in here is they're bringing in ideas from the business world, but they're getting strangely changed. And one of the things that cropped up in this paper by Mrs. Signorini is a little diagram showing, I think it's do, study, act, revise or something. It's a 4-point exercise where you run small tests of change and you see what happens. And this means it's outcome based. Right? Now there's big problems with that, which we might get to. This is permeating education in Scotland. This is all over education in Scotland like a rash. It's all over childcare, anything with children attached to it. They're doing this. Now, it comes from Walter Edwards Deming, who was the American statistician and business guru who invented total quality management, which the Japanese used with such success to build very, very good engines. Right? And there's a lot of things that Deming wrote were very far-sighted and appropriate. But the problem is that in the Deming approach, the customers were free to buy the engines or not. When this the Deming approach was talking about small incremental improvements to constantly improve the engines. This has come into the Scottish government, and the people are the engines. We're not the customers. We're the product. So they're changing. They're introducing small tests of change and constantly, incrementally changing the services that they provide in order to improve not the services. No, they're doing this in order to improve us, the people. We are the product. And that's the mindset that they've brought to this. And that's why it's so dangerous.
Yes, well, as somebody in the chat room has said, that the community is really the Borg. It is almost like we've got a hive system being created here. I'm watching the time a little bit, but I think this analysis is so important. I'd like to keep it going. If you're still okay for time, David, we'll probably another 10 minutes and we can finish it. But let's focus this this look at what's happening in Scotland. So I did a tiny bit of research on the gentleman himself, Signorini. Let's have a look at this. It's a letter that he sent to Michael Mahan, member of the Scottish Parliament, and on that, I'm pretty sure I got the right man. This is Communities Analytical Services decision. So this man is analytics and statistician. Seems to fit the bill because I believe he formerly worked at an organisation called Quadstone, which came out of Edinburgh University, suddenly was set up and has now become very, very big indeed. And they've got contracts with a lot of governments where they're handling all the statistics and data. So, you know, we're just the chickens in the hen house, and these people are monitoring us to see how many eggs we're laying. I had a little look on Twitter. I think this is him as well. He's done one tweet. He's got 9 followers. But I was just interested in a couple of friends here, because Nick Bland here is connected with policy making. He's a visiting professor at Edinburgh University. I think that's correct. So we now got policy, these people sitting in the sidelines. And this gentleman, Jim McCormick, well, he's tied in with the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which we could say equates to the Carnegie. So what are these people up to? Of course, not elected, they're not visible, they're not accountable to the public, but they're embedded deep in the creation of policy under Chatham House rules. Now, I hope I've got this one right. We've got DentonRC.com talking about the welfare state. Tell me if it's not the right one and we'll move on.
No, that's correct. This is Walter Williams, who is an American economist and a very good economist, very free market. He understands reality quite well. And because he comes from the black community in America, and he has been successful, and he's watched his own community really become a shambles. I mean, the crime, the statistics, the prison statistics, the illegitimacy statistics, the complete failure of the black American family that he's witnessed has alarmed him enormously. And he's tied this back to the introduction of a very highly geared welfare state. Because what he points out is that coming from the end of slavery in the 1860s, the black community in America was coming from a very low base. They didn't have very much capital, and there was a lot of poverty. And within a generation, they'd made enormous strides. And a generation further on, they'd gone enormously further forward. And this was during Jim Crow laws. You were still getting lynchings. This was a very unappealing world that they were working in. And yet this community, each generation was almost unrecognisable compared to the previous generation. So they were making huge strides forward. And this continued right up to 1965. 1965, Lyndon Johnson said, we're going to introduce the war on want, we're going to introduce a huge welfare state, and we're going to help all of these black people. And as soon as the help started, the problem started. So what he's saying is the help is not help. The help is a problem. The welfare state is toxic to those who it aims to help. It does quite nicely for those in middle-class jobs providing the services. That's not a problem. But for those who actually are on the receiving end, what we see is huge systemic problems. Now, what he's then illustrating is this is not a matter of race, because he then looks at the white underclass in Britain and he finds exactly the same things happening here as happened 40 years previously to the black community in America. So he's tying this up and saying, well, look, the problem is the welfare state. And my point here is that I think is correct, and that what the model of Scottish government is planning for us is more welfare statism, which will mean that those most vulnerable in our society will fare ever more badly. And this will be used as a continuing excuse to rack up the welfare state still higher.
David, excellent analysis, and I totally agree with you. Much of the policies we see coming in north or south of the border are an inversion of common sense. So we're told it's to help us, but clearly it does the opposite, such as the privatisation of the NHS. We see the bodies and the suffering now coming out of the NHS as a result of that wonderful privatisation. But of course, the other attack that's been going on is to break up the heterosexual family, to absolutely divide men and women. And this statistic that you've come across is showing, of course, how men are being forced out of the workplace, and therefore this is disrupting the balance of the average happy home. Let's bring this up, LouRockwell.com, and this is a graph showing the decline in the number of men in the workplace. just a short comment, if you will. And,
it's very dramatic, isn't it? I mean, it's just going down and down and down. Why would that be? Why is that in any way indicating any form of success? It's not indicating that women have greater access to the workplace, because why would that automatically mean that men would be no longer working? It's showing the effects of the welfare state, and it's showing the effects of making the role of men no longer relevant.
Absolutely. I'm just going to very quickly bring in a few slides which I thought were relevant. This is taking a look at Common Purpose back in 2006. This was an overview that I did. So the reddy pink in the centre, Common Purpose selected leaders for the post-democratic society. What I was trying to show was that this organisation had buried itself into the system. It was essentially undermining our society by feeding its agenda into then 170,000 quangos and charities, regional development agencies, regional assemblies, government office of the regions. This was all major change in UK. But the other thing that this diagram showed was, of course, all of these bodies, such as Carnegie, who are feeding their policy into Common Purpose. It's a two-way exchange, in fact, but we've got the Tavistock Institute, Royal Institute of International Affairs, Council on Foreign Relations, the Work Foundation. And what were these organisations doing? Well, amongst other things, they were carrying out studies over a great many years to see how families were faring through the generation. Top left, second box down, longitudinal studies. So I was trying back in 2006 to say, look, you've got a cuckoo in the nest here. This is a dangerous political ideology. It's feeding on these supposedly independent think tanks. They're not, of course. They are not, of course. And then we're creating these unelected bodies, the regional side. And then the other one that we did was to say, well, if you look at society in very simple terms, who are the vulnerable? Youth and school children down at the bottom. We've got society, private sector, and then we've got the means of government. What the Common Purpose cells were doing was permeating down through that like the roots of a tree in order to bring in this political ideology. And what we've been discussing today is really the fruits of that we can now see it producing policy which is being enacted. Another way of looking at Common Purpose, this is an early map we produced. The red dots, which are like a rash, possibly a pox over the country, show the Common Purpose cells. A single dot, 1 to 10 people, but in an urban centre such as London, a single pin, 500 dots. And just to bring in a bit of good news, the blue ones were at that stage cells of people who were supporting what we were doing. But a rash of Common Purpose ideology, Trojan horse, bringing in the sort of policy that David's now exposing in Scotland. And were the documents there to prove what was going on? Well, here we've got another independent commission on good governance in public services. The commission, and we've got a lady called Lucy de Groot and Sir Bob Kerslake, absolutely top Common Purpose people embedded in this so-called independent commission. And then when they had their 10th anniversary, Common Purpose people mixing with very powerful individuals. So Julia Middleton, the chief executive of Common Purpose, a trustee and member of Demos. Well, as far as I'm concerned, Demos was a Marxist organisation. But here she is next to Jeff Mulgan, who became incredibly powerful in government alongside Gordon Brown. So you can follow these people through. If I bring up this page of the same document, we've got David Putnam, Tony Blair's junior minister for education there. And so it goes on. We've got a few more. Sir Jeremy Beecham here. These are all the great and good, mixing it with common purpose. And what did we say common purpose was doing? Well, we had these documents reported to us. I'm going to be accurate here. I have not seen those documents myself, but the gentleman who provided this overview said that when he went back to revisit the site, they'd mysteriously disappeared. What did he see? Policy documents about how to control a host city. That was dealing with social engineering and community control through common purpose. Education documents, how we were going to get into schools. And then they spoke about future leaders controlling society, not elected democratically, but created by common purpose. Ordinary people to be engineered into the correct society. Well, I think we've seen a bit of that north of the border, and all bodies of responsibility and influence should be involved with common purpose, who will appoint their leadership. And where does your loyalty lie? Well, it's not even to the general public or communities, it's to common purpose in the first instance. And really, isn't that what we're seeing with SNP at the moment, David, where we've now got rules that people can't speak out against their own party?
Yes, there seems to be, there's a standing order for all MSPs and MPs in the Scottish National Party. And the standing order is you cannot criticise the party leadership, you cannot criticise any group decisions, meaning party decisions. You cannot criticise another MP or MSP from the party. Now, I understood that the requirement for an MP, the legal requirement, was that they were to operate on behalf of the constituents, using their best efforts and in accordance with the dictates of their own consciences. So as far as we're aware, the SNP have actually superseded this, and their standing orders take precedence.
I'm at that point where I say, I'm thinking, what do I say next? I'm going to put this slide up on screen to really make people think. But our analysis, certainly UK column analysis, is that people are being attacked in their own country. But what sort of attack is it? It's subversive, it's socio, political and economic. This is an attack because these people are essentially hostile to us. What is psychopolitics? Well, it's the art and science of asserting and maintaining dominion over the thoughts and loyalties of individuals, officers, bureaus and masses, and the effect of conquest of enemy nations through mental healing. Note that term, mental healing. What is this definition? Where's all this come from? Well, this is straight out of effectively the Communist Party. This was a quote from Mr. Bera, who was in charge of security around Stalin, very dangerous man. But listen to what he says: by psychopolitics, our chief goals are effectively carried forward. To produce a maximum of chaos in the culture of the enemy is our first most important step. Our fruits are grown in chaos, distrust, economic depression, and scientific turmoil. At last, a weary populace can seek peace only in our offered communist state. At last, only communism can resolve the problems of the masses. Now, all we have to do is change communism here to communitarianism, which is based on the communist model, but we've added in the corporate sector. So I'll leave people to think about that, but my personal view is we have an ideology attacking us, and we can see the country being destroyed, be it the state of the roads, state of schools, NHS, armed forces, the turmoil in government, or the economic breakdown. Well, we've covered a very heavy programme today. Thank you very much, David, for your excellent analysis. We'll stay on the trail of the Scottish model of government. I thought we would need something to lift us before leaving you for the weekend. Which something that always makes a big difference to us here at the UK column is when people send us thanks for what we do. And I'd just like to bring up on screen a little card which I opened this morning. Here it is. Are you there, Nick? Sorry, my fault. That's actually my fault, not Nick's fault. There we are. Here's just a note And what did it say? A big thank you to Brian Gerrish, Kate, Nick, and all the team at the UK column for the support and help that has saved our lives and increased our awareness and knowledge. We are okay and forever grateful. Love, Lynn Portures and Natalie Viet. And I'd just like to say it is really wonderful when people do take the trouble to say thank you for what we do. We do it because we know we should, we have to, we must, but it is nice when we get some very uplifting feedback. So what's the solution to this mess? Well, of course, it's looking after your fellow man. Start with charity in your family. Don't forget your neighbours, friends and wider family, and get the message out, not only what's happening in UK and how it's being done, but of course, what we need to do to stop it is to make sure we're all sticking together to help one another. So on that note, I'm going to say, David Scott, thank you very much for joining us. And we will be back on Monday, 1 o'clock. And remember, if you want to have a look at the back issues of news for UK Column, you can now go on YouTube, Square Peg and a Round Hole. Okay, thanks very much, David. We'll look forward to seeing you next week, and I hope your cold gets better.
I'm sure it will. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.